how can I overcome these complications? And one of the things, so just jumping forward, in particular talking about the brain now, one of the things that happened to me in 2017, just to round off my little journey, was I fell down a full flight of stairs. And we were renting at the time. It was an old Victorian house with a threadbare carpet. So literally my head and neck went bumpity, bumpity, bump all the way down the stairs. And all I can say is what a blessing that year, sorry, 2 years later, actually, after my brain had really begun to deteriorate to the point that people used to say to me, you really need to come back out in the media. People need to hear your story. But actually, I was in no fit state to tell my story. I had no confidence, and my brain, worst of all, was becoming worse and worse. My cognition, my clarity, my focus, my memory recall. So I would be in front of patients analyzing a lot of data, and it would come to a point where my brain would know exactly what was wrong with them. This is my gift. However, for my brain to get down to my mouth and me to speak some form of coherent pattern of words became pretty impossible after 2 patients. And as I said, I was blessed enough to start looking into a new area of research, which I'd love to share with you today. And this transformed my life. And I was blessed to go to a conference in May in 2017, which opened my eyes in the respect that they started talking about brain health and how brain health changes for everybody when we're over the age of 30 to 40. We get something called mild cognitive impairment. However, any women on the call, if you have any hormonal difficulties or are in the menopause, the body goes into a condition known as insulin resistance, which you might have heard of or connect to type 2 diabetes. But the fascinating thing is, as well, there is a condition known as TBI, traumatic brain injury, which I had obviously falling downstairs. And what happens with any of these situations, any of these conditions I mentioned, including when you are over the age of, let's just say 40, what happens is your brain too starts to become more insulin resistant. And this basically means with the current diet most people have, we rely largely on glucose or eating a sort of fuel source through the day, which means we are running like a hybrid car, but we are running only our petrol engines. However, there comes a point over the age of 40 or with hormonal difficulties, TBI to mention a few cases, where your brain becomes more resistant to glucose. Therefore, it is not the primary fuel source to repair your neurons. But we have another fuel source. This is the electric component of your car, the hybrid engine, the ketone engine. And there is a huge evidence of research now forming on how the brain actually prefers ketones, and that when there is damage to the brain or the neurons are not being repaired by glucose because the door is effectively shut, in come ketones with no blockages. It's a different transporter system into the brain, and they will feed the neurons and they will repair the neurons. So for me, it's also a passion to say that I would not be on this call now speaking with you was I not aware of actually upgrading my system to increase my ketone level further. And we can go into that later. But it's, as I said, certain subsets, it's very difficult to manufacture your own ketones. And what they've found in research is the higher your blood level of ketones, this magical electric clean fuel source, the more your brain will uptake them. So I'm speaking now on an iPhone with no notes. I'm just remembering what I need to hopefully get across to you today. And I could never have done this without knowing this research on ketones. And then, you know, we'll talk about the diet and other aspects and strategies that you can take on board. But this is life-changing information. And my passion is also about true preventative medicine. And in all my years, and I've been practicing over 30 years, this to me is the most powerful piece of preventative information for the future of your health and well-being, both physiologically and neurologically, that I could ever give to you.
Listen, thank you, Jennifer. That's a really good intro, and you're talking about a language of ketones, which I'm sure a great deal of people have heard about before, and it gets confused from my experience of people talking about raspberry ketones, and if it's a fuel source, and we're normally, I don't know, taking on glucose into the system through converted carbohydrates and various other stuff, how do we get it into the system? Where does it come from? And why does the brain, I know I'm asking you lots of questions, I've got too many to ask you, but why does our diet affect our brain function, right? And then how do we get the ketones into our brains? Because if it matters that much, surely it should be pretty easy.
Well, I think that the problem has been, we have been given misinformation for decades about what is the right kind of diet. So we have been advised to have a high carbohydrate and low fat diet. Fat is the killer. And this has been pushed down our necks for way too many decades. And so this is against my belief, but I would love to take a quote from an eminent epidemiologist from King's College, and that's Professor Tim Spector. And I recently put a passage from his book actually on my social media, because I was just rejoicing when someone of this stature was writing what I'm about to share. He said, "Fat for years considered the evil of nutrition is now shown to protect against heart disease and diabetes, not the reverse. Urgently, we need to reassess what we know about food and unlearn the myths that have misled us for so long." Now, I went to another conference. The last conference I went to before lockdown was in LA, and this was the Metabolic Health Summit. And here I wanted to hear from independent researchers, scientists, and doctors. What is the future of healthcare? Is it where I think it is, a low fat, a low carbohydrate, higher fat diet, and the importance of ketones in the bloodstream? Is this what it's all about? And literally every single doctor, scientist, researcher boiled it down to, the more we raise our blood sugar, the more we raise our insulin and then become resistant, the body just becomes resistant to insulin. The more we then raise our inflammatory markers. And with my functional medicine hat on, inflammation is the root cause of all disease. So we can see here, we really have got the diet wrong. And if we want to start caring for our brain is basically fat and water. So we need to change the way we eat, as in we need to lower our carbohydrates and be aware, even with fruit and vegetables, not having things like baked potatoes or fruits with a lot of fructose, which is fruit sugar. Things like bananas in particular, but choose fruits like berries, choose good quality fats, even grass-fed butter. Don't touch the plastic margarines. They are chemical margarines. Go for what nature sort of intended for you. We need to increase, as I said, our natural fats. Also medium chain triglycerides, which is MCT, derived from coconut oil. MCTs are another way we get ketones. MCTs have a slight side effect in the body, in the respect you have to bring them in such small quantities, otherwise you will be attached to the lavatory. So that's a really important thing, but they are essential. There's new research now with Alzheimer's looking into MCT, and an amazing Dr. Mary Newport was a pioneer, really bringing the MCTs to the fore, really. And then many of us have heard of the value of fish oil, which is another form of oil that's known as a long chain fatty acids, and that too is essential for the body. But and also water, hydration. So as I said, our brain is fat and water largely. So even to optimize brain function, just make sure you're not dehydrated. It's so easy to be on calls and suddenly a call runs over, then you're in a next call. Just have a bottle of water, filtered water, as pure as you can, on your desk to make sure that you're actually hydrating your body. But going back to ketones, so ketones, now we have, and this is one of the things I want to share with you today, the way we normally get into the state of ketosis, which is raise ketones in the blood, traditionally we had to do it two ways, one of two ways. It's predominantly following a higher fat, lower carbohydrate diet. So that means really no more than 20 grams of carbohydrates a day. So if you start reading your labels, including on some of these so-called healthy protein bars, you'll see that one protein bar might have 65 grams of carbohydrate / sugar in it. So immediately you're over that quota. So it can be traditionally very difficult to follow this kind of regime. The second way is fasting. And as a naturopath, that's part of the practice that naturopathy believes in. But this again, you know, and it's coming into the fore now. We've had a lot with Dr. Michael Mosley, the 5-2, the 16-8, all these kind of regimes. And by having that gap, that window, it allows our engine to move from this petrol engine, glucose engine, to begin to switch into the ketone electric energy. But you really need a gap of at least 12 hours, some people up to 18 hours before that engine begins to kick in. And as I said earlier, the critical thing with the research is showing with the brain, the higher your blood level of ketones, the more the brain will uptake. Now, ketones are this phenomenal fuel source, as Brad mentioned. However, they are known as a dual metabolite with cell signaling properties. And one of the cell signaling properties is reducing inflammation, which goes back to the Metabolic Health Summit and how inflammation is the root cause of all disease. So by raising our ketone level in the blood, we will also be repairing our inflammation or lowering our inflammation. It's phenomenal. There's new research looking into DNA and switching faulty DNA off. But the biggest thing is the more we increase these levels, the more, as I said, the body can repair. We can lower our blood glucose, therefore we become more insulin sensitive. The body does this and the brain. But here comes the big caveat. How many people really want to change their diet or wait to get into ketosis? Because traditionally, I've worked with Olympic athletes who, before a technology, which I'm going to introduce to you in a minute, came along, if their plane or their journey was delayed and they didn't have the ketogenic foods to keep them in that optimum state, they would be out of ketosis for 5 days. So it's very hard to get into ketosis. So I used to follow a ketogenic diet until I fell down the stairs and I hit the menopause, and I had another stress at the time, my mother dying, and all those things together meant that my body became more insulin resistant, and the diet and fasting alone wasn't enough for me. So what is the hero that I'm going to talk about now? And this blew my mind. Basically in 2004, Dr. Richard Veitch, a research biochemist who eventually set up a department in Oxford University, was researching a particular aspect, one of the 3 ketone bodies known as beta-hydroxybutyrate. And he took this to the American military. He took 2 studies, one which included heart function. And they were so impressed there and then they gave him a check for $10 million to go ahead with further research. It then caught the attention of NASA and the Navy SEALs because they recognized to be in the state of ketosis is ultimately to be in the state of cognitive and physiological human optimization. However, if soldiers out on a mission, can we really be worried about his diet or be fasting? No. So that began the journey of, can we supplementize this? Can we create this molecule? And so for the last period of years, a lot of scientists have been researching to find and to make the beta hydroxybutyrate and develop the molecule. And this now is what I've been working with for the last 2 years. The product that I use is the world's only naturally fermented bioidentical ketone molecule, which basically means in maximum of an hour of drinking this drink, your body goes into clinical ketosis, which means your blood is over 0.5 millimoles of ketones. Now, that's pretty extraordinary. That one staying with us, I said, I love you to take one of these drinks. I want to see, with a keto warrior like you, what does one drink do to your blood level? So again, we clinically tested everything, and we tested the parameters, and then we tested his blood at the start. What were his ketone levels? And ketone levels after half an hour, ketone levels after 60 minutes and 90 minutes. After 1 hour, when we checked his blood, his ketone level had gone up to 3.7 millimoles of ketones, which is just extraordinary, utterly extraordinary. And this is why I wanted to share part of today. We can talk about making dietary changes. We can talk about integrating fasting, but we can also talk for busy people of an extremely simple hack of just literally mixing a packet of beta hydroxybutyrate with other supportive nutrients within that, shaking it up in a drink, and your body and brain is in ketosis in under the hour. And this has had life-changing effects for me, in the respect that not only brain-wise, as I said, I wouldn't be on here this morning without this. And this is why I want to share this. It is such valuable information. We all need to recognize the importance of our body running on ketones and not running on glucose. We are dual fuel, so it's not saying avoiding glucose, but actually as we age, this is really clear in all the research that's coming out, what our body chooses ketones. So the ways we can do that, as I said, it's fasting, it's following a ketogenic diet, or it is actually drinking ketones or manufacturing your own, as I said, through the diet, or with MCT oil, which goes to the liver, and you manufacture ketones from MCT oil. So sorry, I've rambled on a bit long about ketones.
Listen, Joanne's just asked a beautiful question, which was on the tip of my tongue for this, which is, how long does the ketosis last?
So great question, Joanne. The ketones, it's very, very individual. Just like you have some people who naturally get into ketosis, and you have others like myself who then came to a point where I did not get into ketosis no matter how hard I tried. And that's when I needed extra. So in general, MCT oil is considered about a 3-hour life in the body. So if you had one shot in your coffee in the morning, that's 3 hours. What about the other 21 hours in the day? Equally with the drinkable ketones, you can get different forms. You can get a stronger form, which is 30% more ketones. But this standard form, I would say, in fact, the window is actually a very odd window, because people go, why is it such a big window? It's 2 to 6 hours. Now, with my naturopathic hat on, I would look at that and say, it's all down to the individual's body and health, and actually genetics as well, and the journey, the health journey, or the challenges your body's gone through. Because the more you have challenges, the more you have repair, the more you have inflammation, your body is so wise, it will grab the ketones and it will utilize them for repair as a primary sort of focus. Then later on, you know, we know ketones, for example, raise our GABA levels, which is a neurotransmitter, a calming neurotransmitter. So we see how mentally people's mood can change. But actually, if someone's got repair or pain, then, and I had incredible pain. I haven't been to a gym for 16 years, but actually 3 months of drinking the ketones, my inflammation literally went overnight. And that was purely down to consistently taking ketones. And then I began to see them in different areas. So I as a minimum would take 2 a day. I'd take 1 in the morning and 1 later on the day. So if your objective, for example, is brain optimization, and you go into work, and or even on the train, you need to fire, you need to plan for meetings, then for me, it's an absolute no-brainer. I have to take a ketone in the morning. My body just doesn't generate it on its own. I wish it did, but I've done plenty of experiments without taking them. And, you know, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of work, or just not able to focus. But if I take a ketone, it's like, right, bang, off I go, and I do. So as I said, a little bit of a long answer, but 2 to 6 hours is the generally accepted view of ketones in the body from the drink.